It's deja vu at the top after a dominant napper throw it away in race number 3.
Hello and welcome back to the British Touring Car Podcast. We are back once again to have a look at the CROFT weekend, which we have just witnessed. We stayed at home this weekend, didn't we, Russ?
We did, well, stayed at my home.
Stayed at your home, yeah. You put on a lovely pizza and garlic bread,
You know
which
me.
I was very appreciative of. But yeah, it wasn't the weekend I was expecting to come back to, in all honesty.
Well, it didn't rain as you prophesied.
No, there are a few sprinklings at the end of race one, but nothing to really change any results. And I was hoping for a little bit more action. It all felt a bit processional at times.
That's British Touring Cars 2023 in a nutshell, unfortunately. It has been a bit
Yeah,
processional at times this season, and I don't see it changing with only 4 rounds to go. But there were some talking points, there were some exciting parts, there were some brown trouser moments, and there were some overtakes that are quite good. So we should start straight into it with the qualifying report from Saturday. I did qualifying this week because you couldn't be bothered. You were running around in Birmingham. So,
I was at a museum.
yeah, the culture vulture that you are.
Thank you.
I know. So I am in charge of the qualifying, and I'm going to do it a lot quicker than you did because nothing happened for most of it.
Well, I'm glad I didn't miss out on much.
No, the only interesting thing was that Cook was potentially what you might consider to be slightly outside where he's expecting to be qualifying. He was sort of top. Sorry?
Yeah, he was.
Oh, sorry, I thought you said something else.
He was just agreeing with you, sir.
He'd done well in practice and was going well in qualifying as well, was top of the board at one point. It was just a general qualifying session, to be honest with you. Sutton did a good time. Camish did a good time. Houston spun. It was business as usual. The only real interesting part of the qualifying session was about 5 minutes to go, where DeLion crashed his car, spinning it and smacking the barriers quite hard, causing a little bit of damage to the car on his qualifying debut. That did bring out a red flag, and that did, of course, mean everybody had to return to the pits. And there was then a 5-minute shootout post the clear up. Napa boys didn't bother going out. By this point, Camish had already set what would go to be the fastest lap time of a 1:22.1. Rowbottom was behind by 0.16 and Sutton 0.19. Sorry. No, they didn't go back out. And to be honest, with the track that late on, and you don't really have a lot of time to warm up the tyres at Croft, nobody particularly improved. Ingram was able to get himself up to 7th. He had struggled in the session with a few problems with the car, and he also had a spin in qualifying as well. So he was recovering and managed to recover himself to 7th. But it was Dan Camish who was able to take Napa's 6th pole in a row. They've now taken a pole at every single weekend so far this year. We'll see if they can get all 10. But Camish was the man on pole from Dan Rowbottom, from Ashley Sutton. Josh Cook, a slight surprise, up in 4th. Colin Turkerton, Jake Hill, the best of the BMW runners. Tom Ingram down in 7th. Aaron Taylor-Smith dragged the Vauxhall all the way up to 8th. A really good showing from him. Stephen Jelly on the weekend that would mark his 250th start in the sport, qualified 9th, with Aidan Moffat, meaning there were 2-1 performance cars in the top 10. Daniel Lloyd, Ricky Collard, Ronan Pearson, Adam Morgan and Mikey Doble rounding out the top 15. I suppose the only other person of note is Rory Butcher, who qualified down in 18th. And also Daryl DeLion, despite having his fastest lap time taken away for causing the red flag, didn't qualify at the back of the grid. That went to Nick Halstead, who was 3.1 seconds off the pace.
Yeah, as you say, Rory Butcher was a bit of an anomaly there down in 18th. And for me, the Toyotas were quite far off where I expected them to be.
In fairness to Butcher, when the red flag came out, he was on a fast lap, which would have put him comfortably inside the top 10.
Okay.
But you can't, well, that's the risk when you wait that long to hook up a good lap, isn't it, at the end of the day?
Very much so.
As usual, there were several times lost with track limits. I can't bother to list them. I didn't make a note of them. It's par for the course these days, isn't it? There are several certainties in touring cars. Napa will take a pole. Paul O'Neill will make a joke about Tim Harvey in a buffet, and there'll be times deleted due to track limits in qualifying.
Yeah, there was a significant amount with one driver having 3 lap times actually disallowed due to track limits, which it really doesn't help. I think, it was Sam Osborne.
Yeah, this weekend it was, but track limits are becoming a big sticking point, as we've discussed on one of our 10 minutes with. So, of course, I've done the qualifying, which means it's slightly the other way around this week. You've done 2 races. Are you okay? You've done a lot of work this weekend. You're not
Yeah, it
used
was
to it.
quite a lot of work. My
Yeah, welcome
fingers
to
were
my
hurting
world.
from writing down all those notes. But yeah, we'll muddle our way through it, and we'll take you through to race one.
Floor's all yours.
So race one then, looking at dry in the sky, if not a little bit overcast. Rain was sort of like scheduled for around 2 o'clock. The forecasts reckoned.
Well,
Um,
Tom Ingram said that he had 5 different weather apps and they all said different things. So make of that what you will.
Yeah, they did. They did. And this weekend, we would see the drivers be using the soft, medium, and hard tyre, which can always chuck another element into the mix. And it was quite important that on the front row, they were starting on softs, along with Ash and Cook. The first of the mediums being Hill, Turkington, but with Ingram on softs from 7th. But the majority towards the rear of the grid would be starting on the hard tyres, probably just trying to get it out of the way, take the pain early, and then try and get some places and positions back in the later races. As you said, it was Jelly's 250th start in the touring cars, a milestone which I thought he would have passed by now. In
Yeah, I
all
was slightly
honesty,
surprised, but then I suppose
yeah,
if you work it out, it's 30 races a season. So I can't do maths, but that's several seasons, isn't it?
yes, very
I
much
mean,
so.
it's nearly 10. It's nearly 10 seasons, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just over 8, which I suppose for Jelly, yeah, he's been around that long, hasn't he?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Jade Edwards was pushed from the grid on the formation lap and would have to start from last. But she would start the race, although come into the pits at the end of lap one. The start of a few issues for her. One of note that she has been given a 5-point deduction in the championship for taking another engine outside the allocated amount. Um, Gamble went into the pits before race start as well from 19th, seemingly a clutch issue. It seems as if his luck this season isn't going to change anytime soon.
What is wrong with Toyota, man? It's been
I don't know.
appalling, isn't it? It's been absolutely dreadful from them. Particularly as this year they've got their own engine. You keep mocking me for saying Butcher was an outside dark horse, and I did say it, but I can't believe how bad they are. They've just been nowhere, have they? I mean, you'd argue that all things considered, One Motorsport have had a better season than Toyota, despite the fact that they've had quite an ordinary season themselves.
The development has been better for one as well. They seem to have found a setup that now works with the car.
I disagree.
And
They
then,
found Barry Plowman. That's what's happened.
yeah, the mid-season break has brought that in for them, and it looks like their fortunes are changing. So maybe Jade has made the move at the right time.
Just a quick question on that, because I do love to
Yep,
knock you off your stride when you're trying to
go
do
on.
2 races rather than one. Do you think with Plowman going there that that means that Hard really are struggling, which we know anyway, so that you can answer that with a yes, and
Yep.
B, do we think Dynamics are done for good? Because I can't see that they'd let their chief sort of man who knows everything about those cars go to a rival team if they're coming back next season, because he's going to be divulging
Well,
all the secrets about the setup. And look, you could say it's a coincidence, but Cook and Moffat were in different cars effectively this weekend. Yeah, I know they were still both
yes.
Honda Civics before you try and get funny with me, but they were different cars. They were different animals this weekend. They looked quick. They kept pace. Even on the worst tyre, Cook still kept pace at the front. And that has not happened the rest of this season at all.
I think I said to you over the mid-season break that engineers seem to be having a bigger impact this season, especially having seen Barry Plowman and the influence that he's had over that team hard. Certainly Lloyd and formerly Thompson's side of the garage there. They've been performing well and probably outperforming where we would expect them to be. And now that we've seen him move effectively back, because they said there was going to be this partnership with Dynamics for this season, moving back there and to see this slight upturn in form, whether it carries on, it remains to be seen. But I think it probably will as long as he stays there. It's interesting to see how much of a big effect an engineer can have on the fortunes of a team or fortunes of a driver.
You haven't answered my question though. I agree with everything you've said, but you've not answered my question.
I think it very much comes down to money. And
I
that's the reason that it didn't come around this season, is that it comes down to money.
I also think with the passing of Steve Neal, I don't think dynamics are coming back. It's my personal opinion. I'd
Yeah,
like to see them back, but the fact that Matt Neal has already moved on to driver coaching at Team Hard and that Plowman had left to go to Hard, albeit for only half a season, I think we've potentially seen the end of team dynamics in the touring cars. I hope I'm wrong. I really hope I'm wrong, but I don't know. It's odd that you'd let Pep Guardiola go manage Manchester United, as it were,
hmm.
and that feels like what's happened here.
I, I I wonder whether, with the whole behind the scenes bits that have been going on with Will Powell being relieved of all his duties, I'm wondering if there's going to be an opening for Matt Neal there, and whether he could take on an ambassadorial role or a team manager role there, and actually almost merge the teams, because that's how they're going to get the best fortune.
So only time will tell on that one. Going back to my earlier point, what is wrong with Toyota, Sam? What is wrong with them? Because
They
on
seem
paper
to
they've
have,
got everything. They've got manufacturer backing. They've got one, you'd say, not elite driver but top tier driver, and two very good drivers,
yep.
and they just are not at the races, if you pardon the pun.
For me, this season reliability has been a bit of an issue. And I think actually reliability has gradually got worse for the
Mm.
team since Speedworks effectively left the role and Ingram left that team, as it were. Um, I don't know whether it's a case of the team are taking on too much having the three cars. Um, and I see the three drivers as quite different drivers as well. So I think it might be difficult for the team to all pull in the same direction and work on a setup that suits every driver when you're getting different responses from each driver, sort of thing. Um,
I already have
I
a
think
grand theory.
it's going to be a combination of things. Plus, the engine they built might not be good enough yet.
I think they'll change the car next year.
Really?
It's it's quite old for a touring car. It's 3 seasons old.
Okay. Astra's still there.
Yeah, but they've given the Astra a bit of a facelift, a bit of a dynamic aerodynamic lift, and PMR haven't got the backing of Vauxhall, whereas Toyota do,
Yeah.
and Toyota will want to be winning at motorsport. They're having a big comeback in motorsport at the minute in terms of they want to be in everything and winning everything, and I
Yeah.
don't think they'll want to see this happen. So they might move. I think they might move for a different car. Although what car, I don't know.
I was going to say, do you think they'll move to a different car, or do you think they're more likely to actually step back?
I certainly hope the former rather than the latter.
Yeah, because if they're not going to get the results, then they might not see it as viable financially or commercially. It is a possibility, unfortunately.
You can tell it's been a really boring race weekend, and we're talking about literally anything other than the races, isn't it? Sorry, go back to your race report.
Shall I get into the race now?
Well, yes, Napa started on pole, Napa won. There you go. That's the race report, isn't it?
Oh, thanks. I didn't have to write all these notes then.
Go ahead. Sorry, I'll shut up now and let you deliver your super duper race report.
So Ingram had a very bad start, especially compared to the rest of the grid. It was almost like he'd forgotten that the lights had changed, and a couple of drivers behind him managed to get a jump on him. Aaron Taylor Smith was pushed wide through the gravel at turn one. Mark that one up for the counting that we were doing for our predictions. Hill managed to get through on Turkington in a beautiful move, going down into Tower, going out wide, cutting back on the exit, and then going side by side through the Jim Clark S's. And I think we both said at the time that takes some cojones, doesn't it?
Yeah, massive cojones. And also loved, was it on the grid on this race or race two, where he was asked by Paul O'Neill, will you be racing gently of Colin? He was like, no,
No,
I will not be. And fair play,
that
I
was
love
race
that.
two.
Was it race two? I love that
Yeah.
from Jake, and his move was excellent. And he's not afraid to do those moves on his teammate, and nor should he be. And it's really
No,
good to see.
no, and I think he's in a really beneficial position of having that WSR support with the car and stuff, but having that separate management team as well.
Yeah.
I think he really gets the best of both worlds. Turkington managed to lose 2 places on that opening lap, and was slightly on the back foot because of it. There was a good battle starting up between Moffat on the hards. He was the first runner on the hard tyre in this race, starting from 10th. And he was basically the cork in the bottle. It was significant to see the amount of time that he'd dropped to Jelly in ninth. It was sort of like 12 seconds that he dropped back down the road, but he did a really good job until the latter stages of keeping the majority of drivers behind him. But yeah, it was a good battle with Lloyd. Lots of changing places behind there in a battle pack of about 6 cars. Unfortunately, Lloyd was shuffled back a few laps later down to 15th and had contact with Pearson, which put Pearson out of the race. Looked like probably toe link damage at the front. Again, it's a bit 50-50. Maybe you should go for the move, maybe you shouldn't. It's possibly a little bit of inexperience for Pearson there.
Yeah, it's kind of summed up his season a little bit.
Yeah.
There's been one too many of these incidents that he's been caught up in.
Incident.
I was desperately trying not to say incident and made it worse by desperately trying not to say it. Yeah, I don't know. You got to remember, he's in his rookie season. He's outperforming his teammate, which is Nick Howsett, who's a fellow rookie, effectively.
Yeah.
And he's not a million miles off Tom Chilton in terms of performances. So he's doing okay. But yeah, a few less of these would be great, particularly knowing how expensive repair bills can be.
Yes, and how much of a detrimental effect it can have on your season as well if you're struggling with that money flow. Jade unfortunately had to come in the pits with an issue, some little niggling gremlins in this first race, but it looks like the team managed to get them sorted for race 2 and race 3. The Napa Fords just escaped at the front, didn't they? All three of them pretty much gapped Cook. Cook was having a good battle with Hill, Turkington, and Ingram, all of them jousting for position, but not really actually making any overtakes. There were a couple of opportunities, but nothing that really stuck.
I think the significant thing for me was that Ash was on the medium tyre and was keeping pace with particularly Rowbottom. Not so much Camish. Camish had gone, but he certainly kept pace with Rowbottom.
Yeah, Butcher came into the pits at the end of lap 8, signifying a poor weekend really for the Toyotas. Certainly not where we expected them to be performing, as we've already explained. Aaron Taylor-Smith and Osborne came together at Tower. Possible push to pass here, as Osborne just seemed to jam it up the inside and was half on the grass, which I think he possibly got reprimanded for.
Not in race 1, didn't?
Not in race 1, okay. It was a bold move, if I remember rightly.
I'm amazed he didn't get reprimanded for it, but he didn't.
Fair enough. Morgan going through the tyres at the second corner, there was a little battle pack that he was trying to work his way through. He was part of this big group that was behind Moffat, and all of his own accord, we seemed to see him spinning through the exit of turn 1 and going through that little kink of turn 2 where they've got that tile bundle in the middle, and he hit it side on. I wonder whether he did the same as Jake Hill came on to do in race 2, I believe it was, and have a spin of his own accord, maybe losing the back end. It wasn't really picked up on any replays, and he continued on after that. And then unfortunately Moffat did get swamped late on. I think about lap 13 he dropped from 9th to 13th. Once he got shuffled out by Taylor-Smith, Collard came past, Lloyd came past as well as Osborne, who was making good progress through the field at that point. And on the final lap we did see Sutton pass Rowbottom, although the commentators weren't fully aware of that until they actually crossed the line at the end of the race, with Rowbottom citing that he missed a few gears, apparently.
As he said, rookie error, but missed some gears. It's good humour from Rowbottom. You've got to know your place in the team, and at this stage of the season, Rowbottom is not fighting for the title. If he wants to fight for the title next season, he's got to keep everybody happy, and there's no point keeping Sutton behind or making it difficult. It's what team orders are. Like or lump them. It is what happens. It's the grown-up answer is that all motorsport has a degree of this, and if you don't like it, then it's just what it is.
Yeah, there was never going to be a chance that one, he was really going to catch Camish, and two, that Camish would let him past anyway, because Camish still feels that he is in that fight, being in fifth in the championship.
He's
So
not, but
then,
it's good for him to feel it.
so then the finishing places for race one, Camish took the victory. From Ash Sutton in second and Rowbottom in third to make it another Napa clean sweep on the podium. Josh Cook would stay in fourth, Hill would take fifth, from Ingram in sixth, Turkington in seventh. Jelly had a really quiet race in eighth, just off the back of that battling group, but well ahead of the Moffat battle that ensued for the most of the race. Sam Osborne managed to profit the most from that, finishing ninth overall.
Good result.
All four Nappers in the top nine. I mean, it's an excellent team performance, that, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Aaron Taylor Smith finished in 10th, from Collard in 11th, Dan Lloyd in 12th, Aidan Moffat in 13th, Mikey Doble in 14th, and Tom Chilton in 15th.
Right, should we move on to race number 2?
Yes, your bit this time.
My bit this time. I've got the easy job. Race 2 then. Ash and Josh Cook both started on the soft tyre. Ingram was late out to the grid with electrical gremlins. Thankfully, it didn't stop him during the race, and he didn't get any form of fine or penalty for being late out. He was late out, but not too late out, as it were.
Yeah.
As we began the formation lap, rain was in the air and threatening, but ultimately didn't come to pass, which is a bit of a shame. So I'd like some last-minute chaos dives to the pit lane and whatnot, but we didn't get that, unfortunately. Off the line, as you'd expect, Sutton got the best start on the soft tyre and was pretty much allowed past by Camish into turn one. In the interviews in race 1, they'd basically already intimated that Sutton was going to have the better strategy for race 2 and he would be let through from the off, so no surprise there. Moffat had to stop to get some new trousers after he was squeezed and spun through the gravel at incredibly high speed into turn 1. Touched by Aaron Taylor Smith, who would get a penalty for this. I'll cover that in penalty corner at the end of the races. Did really well to hold on to it, did really well to miss everybody, and did really well not to need new trousers there and then. So good job all round.
One thing I find ironic, and it seems to happen more often than not, is the car that has put another car off and is coming sweeping across a corner is almost the same car that gets taken out. It was very close.
Yes.
Moffat coming sideways across the track almost took out Taylor Smith on the way through, and it seems to be that way that happens.
It's also mad to me that we see this quite a lot, where we've both got our heads in our hands going, no, and
nothing happens.
I don't want to jinx it, but they never get collected. It's quite amazing, really, that at these high speeds, they just don't get collected. It's
considering also how far off track he was, and we know that the drivers are strapped in so securely that their peripheral vision, seeing that far off to one side, is not very good in those seats. So for drivers to actually get out of the way, whether it was more luck than judgment, I'm just grateful that there wasn't a big accident resulting from it.
Agreed. Ingram made up for his poor start in race 1 with a good start in race 2, getting himself up to 4th and trying to fight the Napa podium. It wasn't really Patterson's day this weekend. He had to limp into the pit lane with an issue early on. Edwards and Butcher were both hit with a 10-second penalty for a false start. It happens to every driver now and then. It just sums up their luck at the minute. It's just not going their way at all. We then saw some really good racing between Ingram and Rowbottom. Rowbottom, who, by his own admission, had been labelled New Andy Neat, which I thought was quite a hilarious comment he made at the end of race number 1. But him and Ingram were racing really well, really good, hard racing, and did well to keep Ingram behind him. One thing that really struck me in this race in particular was just how much the BMWs were struggling. They were absolutely nowhere near the top 4 or 5 cars. They just had no pace to make any sort of inroad at all. Particularly at a track where they've gone well in the past. Yes, they were scoring well inside the top 10, but all the title rivals are ahead of them. They just couldn't make any form of dent in them at all.
Yeah, and this was the race that obviously had the mistake from Jake Hill, losing it on his own while he was behind Cook, running at the top of all those BMWs, yet making a silly mistake.
Yes, thank you for ruining that and taking away
That's okay.
one of the only talking points from race 2. Top man. Pearson then had to pit. Again, not a good weekend for him. Another problem for the Jack Sears contestant. and he's lost significant ground this weekend. As to be fair, has Patterson. Those non-finishes really are hurting, and
Yeah,
that's how the Jack Sears works. It
it
rewards
is.
you finishing the race. Gamble took his another retirement, not his first of the season. It's not been a good opening 6 rounds for George Gamble at the Toyota outfit, as we
Not at
discussed
all.
already. Hill spun on his own. Who saw that one coming?
Did
Who was
he?
forewarned? He did,
Wow.
yes. It was getting too close to Cook. It was quite an unusual error, and I've put down here it's a championship costing error. I think that
Yeah,
he's
quite
out.
possibly.
I think
Certainly
uh,
with how things have played out this weekend. Obviously, we'll go through the final standings at the end of the pod. But yeah, he's a little way behind. And mistakes like that, we didn't see very many, if any, from him last season like that, which he, which kept him right in the hunt for the championship until the end.
absolutely, it's an unusual error. He's done it on his own, basically following too close to Cook and going too hard into a corner, having to brake quickly and switching the car around. Easier to do in a rear-wheel drive car, of course,
Yeah,
and he's just yeah, it's an unusual error, and I think it's a championship costing error. And then Sutton won by about a decade at the front. He was already up in getting ready to start race one in Scotland. By the time he'd finished, it's ridiculous. It's
over
mental. I don't know what else to
over
say.
7 seconds.
Yeah, I've run out of superlatives.
When else do we see those kinds of gaps for a leading driver in a touring car race? 2, maybe 3 seconds, okay, is down as a good, confident, commanding win, but this is just ridiculous.
Particularly when second place is a car that's the same as him.
Yeah,
But
yeah, and the driver, yes, okay, they're on the medium tyres compared to Sutton on the soft, but it's still a car that has been set up by the same team. It's a car that's in the title hunt. It's a massive gap.
interestingly, I'd put Sutton wins, and with it confirms the crown ? And then race 3 happens.
Very much so. Oh dear.
So
Go on then.
just to
Give us the final order.
just give you the final order. Ash Sutton won from Dan Camish and Dan Rowbottom. Tom Ingram couldn't break the Napa podium, so that's a double 1-2-3 for Napa. Josh Cook finishing 5th, Turkington 6th, Jelly 7th, Ricky Collard 8th, the best of the Toyotas. Daniel Lloyd got himself into the top 10 with a 9th. Tom Chilton picking up points for Hyundai in 10th. Jake Hill after the spin all the way down in 11th position. Aaron Taylor-Smith 12th, Adam Morgan 13th, Andrew Watson into the points in 14th, and Sam Osborne making it a double points weekend for him down in 15th. And I think that covers off race 2, apart from to say that the reverse grid pulled out a 6 with all the cars on hard tyres, and suddenly Ash making it 3 from 3 didn't look too ridiculous. Well, not 3 from 3, we're making it 3 Napa wins from 3. Didn't look too far off. However, Sam, race 3.
It didn't look too far off, no. However, it was Colin Turkington that would be promoted to pole position, and we all know that Colin is the king of Croft. Despite having only won once in the last, I think, 5 seasons there,
And
he still
hating that
does.
nickname.
Yes, he still does hold the record for the amount of wins at Croft, and he would be looking to add to that in race 3. Chilton was the first driver on medium tyres, and he would be starting from 10th on the grid with Moffat first on softs, starting all the way from 17th. So it would be interesting to see how those two drivers would fight through the field. And I think Butcher in 18th was also on the soft tyre. Collard was unfortunately pushed from the grid with an oil leak. Toyota. What is going on? They did, I think, manage to get the oil leak stopped, and he did get out for some running, but it was really turned into a test session. There was quite a lot of oil dropped from the previous support race, and so a lot of track dressing had to be done. Almost half the circuit had a trail of oil coolant around it in some place, and that actually meant that 3 drivers would be starting slightly beside their position on the grid to ensure that everyone had a fair and equal opportunity off the start line. I mean, the biggest talking point of this race probably is from the start, and that is Ash Sutton forgetting his brain for race three. I don't know whether he left it in the motorhome or what, or whether he was just surprised by how slow the BMW actually is. But he
He,
runs into the back of Jelly going through
yeah,
turn two, sending one Jelly spinning, two breaking his wheel, and giving them both punctures.
he says he was caught up in somebody else's incident. I am not so sure from the replays we've seen. What I
No.
will say is that I thought this was the worst weekend by far for television direction and replays. I'm sorry to call it out, but we had battles that were cut away from for no apparent reason whatsoever. We
Yep.
had hardly any replays of the Ash Sutton Jelly incident. This is a potentially title deciding incident, potentially. And we
Yeah.
got
Yeah. It could be.
one grainy on board, and that was basically it. Yeah, it was, yeah. The touring cars doesn't help itself at times. I know it's not F1, and I know we can't keep comparing it to F1, but F1 has a camera in every car. It has a million camera angles to look at incidents with. It has a helicopter, and I get we're not going to get that in touring cars to the same degree, but I think we need more cameras at tracks, and we need better TV direction and better replays because it's difficult to piece together this particular incident because Sutton is saying one thing, he's saying it was somebody else's incident he got caught up in. That's
Mm,
not how I read it, but I've not.
no.
We can't see all the replays.
No, and one thing that I'd probably like to see, and I think it would modernise the coverage quite well, are even like first lap drone footage.
Yeah,
If you have a drone hovering high enough above the grid that you can see the grid pull away all at once and then follow them for that first lap, there are plenty of skilled drone flyers out there. All you need to do is bolt a fairly small camera to it. They come so small nowadays. And I think it would be almost a little bit of a wow factor for the touring cars to have something like that. Um,
I agree, but I don't want to digress again. So get back to the race.
so Lloyd would also go out at the first corner, a mistake that he looks like he made on his own. A little bit of oversteer and seemed to fire himself exit stage left straight into the barrier. It was a fairly heavy hit, but he did manage to get out of the car straight away and walked away without issue. It just seems like he lost it on his own, which is a shame because he was having a decent weekend as well. Um, Morgan,
He
so
just to add to Dan Lloyd. I'm just
yeah.
reading his Instagram. He clipped some oil, and that sent him on the hard
Oh.
tyre, not having enough temperature in the tyre. He clipped some oil, and that sent him into a spin. Well, that's what he says,
Okay.
rather than I misjudged it on cold tyres. But
Fair enough, fair enough. So, obviously, as a result of so many cars being scattered about, the safety car was brought out, something that we haven't seen too often this season, thankfully. Um, and under that safety car, Morgan came into the pits with an issue. He would go on to retire from the race, only completing 3 laps. Safe to say that Morgan was the most underperforming of the BMWs this weekend. Certainly wasn't at the races, and considering Jelly's performance across the season, Morgan has flattered to deceive this weekend.
I would argue he's potentially flat to deceive most of the season, but that's for another day.
Yeah, that's possible. Moffat was up to 8th by this point with all the shenanigans that were going on. He made the most of it and gained quite a few places. We got back to racing on at lap 5. There was a push to pass from Boutel on Osborne, which was rather suspect in my mind, and something that would, I don't know whether it would come back to bite him, but later on in the race, Boutel would be pushed out wide, get his a little bit of comeuppance, and drop many places because of it,
I
and
felt for
eventually
him though, because
retire.
he was well into the points at that point and would have
He
scored
was,
his first points for the season,
he
which is
was,
a bit gutting.
as was his teammate Daryl De Leon.
Yeah,
And his race was unfortunately buffered by the fact that he had a drive-through penalty for having a mechanic on the grid past the time. Something that he can't really affect, and that the team probably need to have a small inquiry into, because if he'd have stayed where he was keeping decent pace, he was running 12th at the time. To take points on an opening weekend would have been an excellent finish for him.
We'll discuss him more in the driver grades because I'm conscious how time is already escaping us on this one. So we'll pick up
Yes,
how we think
very
his
much so.
debut went in the driver grade podcast.
Chilton unfortunately stopped on track on lap 11. We got no replays of this at all. I think it was just possibly a mechanical issue. We don't know whether there was contact with anyone, but obviously he was one of those drivers to look out for being on mediums, but he wouldn't go on to finish the race. Gamble was up 15 places, up to 10th, and raced fairly well considering his luck and misfortune from the start of the weekend, and managed to finish it on a positive. And then Jake Hill, another spin.
Rinse and repeat.
Rinse and repeat, certainly. It seems as if he might have the rear end of the BMW a little bit too loose, maybe. It seems as if when he comes off the power, it gets a bit light on that rear end. And I think that's what's caused both the spins that have happened this weekend, dropping him down eventually to 7th position overall.
Apologies, Teddy's just entered the room. Wait, stop it. You can sit there, but don't faff there. Say hello to YouTube, all right? Sit down, move that out of your way. This is what the YouTube viewers pay for, is it? Or like to see, is the content they like to see. Right, you can see it, but don't faff. Sorry, where are we?
That's okay.
I edited on YouTube.
I was just going to run through the final grid order for the end of round 18 and race 3 of the weekend. So Colin Turkington took the win by 3 and a bit seconds from Tom Ingram, who had made...
Yeah, I've just taken the bag off the bed so it doesn't make the noise. Do continue.
Good.
From the top, if you would, sir.
So to finalise the classifications for round 18 and race 3 of the weekend, Colin Turkington would take the win by 3.2 seconds from Tom Ingram. Again, Tom banking the points when Sutton doesn't finish is going to be pivotal coming into that title fight towards the end of the season. Josh Cook would go on to have a stellar weekend, finishing 3rd in race 3, from Dan Hamish in 4th, Dan Rowbottom in 5th, Aidan Moffat in a brilliant 6th, moving all the way up from, I think it was 17th on the grid. He made really good progress, quiet, without incident as well, and did really well to make the most of it. Jake Hill, after his spin, would finish in 7th. Butcher finally had a good race and finished up in 8th, from Aaron Taylor-Smith. George Gamble, as I mentioned, in 10th. Michael Crees scoring his first points for Team Hard, now back there in the Leon, obviously taking over from Bobby Thompson, would finish 11th. Mikey Doble winning the Jack Sears this weekend, finishing in 12th, just ahead of Dexter Patterson, Andrew Watson, and finally Ricky Collard. Whew. That's probably the most excitement we've had all weekend with Teddy coming in.
Yeah, and he's gone. Come in, faff, refused to expand, leaves. Right, should we have a quick look at what that does to the table then, and then we will look at our predictions for the weekend. Actually, I need to do penalty corner first, don't I?
Yes, you do.
So you already mentioned that. Is there a jingle for this?
No.
Oh, shame. Okay. Jade Edwards had a 5 points deducted from her driver championship for having changed an engine above the number permitted, as you said. Race 2, Aaron Taylor-Smith was penalised by a 3-place grid drop for an incident involving Aidan Moffat, so that would be when he sent him across the grass. He received an additional 3-place penalty for reaching the number of strikes permitted. Osborne was given a 1-place grid penalty for an incident involving Andrew Watson, so I'm going to imagine that's a push to pass. And then in race number 3, Jack Boutell received a formal reprimand for his push to pass with Sam Osborne. There was also I'll say nasty. Obviously, we've not seen the footage because there is none that's been released, but One Motorsport have received a fine of £2,500 for a Motorsport UK regulation infringement, which, when you actually look at the document, relates to a pit lane fight involving Bob Moffat, from what the steward's decision card says.
The write-up from it of the events that happened, it strikes me as very strange.
Yeah,
in a community where we think a lot of people will get along, it's something that we certainly don't want to see.
Yeah, obviously it didn't just Bob Moffat wasn't the only person involved. Several people were involved. The full write-up is available if you want to go read it yourself. We haven't seen the incident; it wasn't reported on, so we can't really comment further than they were fined for being in breach of the code, and it appears it related to a pit lane fight or pit lane argument, if not a fight, a discussion, a debate, whatever you want to call it.
Right then, shall we get into the championship standings as they end the weekend? Ash Sutton still at the top, fairly unsurprisingly, despite that non-finish. However, the points advantage is still the same. 6 points lead over Tom Ingram. Colin Turkington has jumped above Jake Hill into third, although still a significant 34 points behind Ash Sutton. Jake Hill a further 7 points behind Turkington. Camish just about maybe possibly holding on. I know you're dismissing it, but possibly holding on in fifth. I'm holding out hope, okay?
Or don't.
But he is 46 points behind. Josh Cook is in a fairly solid sixth position now, and I think he'll probably secure that for the rest of the season.
Can I ask you a genuine question then? Do you honestly see Sutton giving up 46 points?
Stranger things have happened.
That's not the answer to the question. Yes or no?
Realistically, no.
No. And there we go.
But you don't know what can happen if he keeps making silly mistakes like that.
Yeah, in my mind, there are 2.5 people in this championship hunt.
2.5.
Because, well, only a fool would write off Turkington because he's always there or thereabouts. I honestly think Hill's done, although I do think he'll have a really strong knock hill weekend, but I think he's done, personally. And Ingram just won't go away. I mean, Ingram describes Sutton as an annoying stone in his shoe that he can't get rid of. I think Sutton would say exactly the same about Tom, because Tom hasn't, lit the results alight in the same way Sutton has, but to be 6 points back, having not had a great season in terms of wins and whatnot, and to only be 6 points off, and Ingram won't go away. Sutton will know that Ingram will not go away.
There's only 3 times that Ingram hasn't scored double figures in a race.
Yeah, he's not going anywhere.
It's absolute consistency, and I don't want to jinx it, but that car seems bulletproof in his hands.
Well, I was about to say Tom Ingram doesn't make mistakes, does he? I honestly can't remember
the calculated.
I can't remember the last mistake Ingram made. I genuinely can't, and that's going back all through his Speedworks days.
Yeah,
I really can't remember a mistake he's made. Possibly, did he ride the curb once at the final chicane? It wasn't really his mistake, was it? That's when Butch decided he wanted to T-bone and get a proper look inside the car.
At Snetterton.
Yeah. I can't think of it.
He's just a really consistent driver, isn't
he? Yeah.
Just to finish off that top 10,
sorry.
Dan Rowbottom in 7th, just ahead of Morgan in 8th, Butcher in 9th, and Collard in 10th. There's quite a significant gap, actually, of 27 points between Collard in 10th and Chilton in 11th. There are effectively 3 drivers still to score. Obviously, Powell won't be taking part in the championship anymore, but we do have Darrell DeLeon there, Jack Buttel and Jade Edwards. Halstead has scored points, but obviously with 2 engine changes. And just a quick look into the Jack Sears table, because that is getting tasty. Mikey Doble took the win with this weekend, and with that takes the lead in the championship on 263 points from Andrew Watson, his teammate, with 259. So just a 4-point gap on the top. 9 points further back is Sam Osborne on 250, and a further point behind him is Dexter Patterson on 249. Ronan Pearson, those non-finishes throughout the season have really started to show and cost him now. He's down on 207 points in 5th, with Buttel, Hamilton, Halstead, Edwards and DeLeon following.
Right, shall we review how we got on with our predictions and do our awards and wrap this up then?
We'll have some awards in this one, and then we'll do our grades and predictions in the next podcast.
Do we do our predictions in the next podcast?
Yes.
Okay.
That's why it's grades and predictions podcast.
Yeah, that's fair.
We just do our awards this time round.
Fair enough. It's only taken us 6, and I still don't know the format. Right, who was your driver of the weekend?
Oh dear, I can't remember what I said to you yesterday.
Brilliant. Do you want me to tell you? Do you want to have another go, or do you want me to tell you who you said?
No, just tell me.
You said Camish.
Yes, Camish, of course. Obviously, taking a win, taking pole position, a second and a fourth, I think it was. As a really good weekend, and part of the reason why I don't think he's quite out of that championship hunt, although the points deficit is big.
You're mental.
I'm being positive.
You're wrong. My drive of the weekend is Tom Ingram. It's a track where Napa were threatening to dominate, and once again, he's made the most of what he can do, and he's come away from a track where Napa have been strong. They've been strong everywhere, but he's managed to keep that deficit down to 6 points. And if Sutton keeps making these mistakes, Ingram will fancy the chance he can nick it, and he's doing everything he can to keep the pressure on. So it's Ingram for me. Your villain of the weekend, do you need reminding of that as well, or can you remember, or do you want to have another stab?
Yeah, I'll have a stab at it.
Mm-hmm.
Was it, or was that yours? That might have been yours. I can't remember.
Brilliant.
Go on, tell me.
You'd gone for Hill.
I had gone for Hill. I thought I might have gone for Hill.
Jeez, we're so good at this.
It's professional, mate.
Clarity, Sam, clarity.
Yes, exactly. Two big self-made errors this weekend, as you say, could be absolutely critical in the championship hunt. Having dropped back to fourth in the championship now, and he didn't outscore Turkington, which he's really let me down on this weekend. So that's partially why he's my villain.
Yeah, I get it, and I think that is a championship losing mistake, but we shall see. There's still 4 rounds to go. My one is Sutton for the second weekend in a row. He's got to stop getting involved in these things, particularly in race 3. He's got to start, being able to survive the first lap of race 3.
He's just keeping it interesting, mate.
He is keeping it interesting, and that is great for all of us. But as we just mentioned before, Ingram doesn't make these kind of mistakes, and you can't see him making these kind of mistakes. I have thought of a mistake he's made, Ingram. He spun it in quali this weekend. Literally this weekend, spun it in quali. But ultimately, it didn't matter. It's a mistake that didn't matter, ultimately. And Sutton is making mistakes that are mattering. That's the third race he's had a retirement from an accident is, in my opinion, his own making. Now, as I say, we haven't had all the replays for this weekend, but from what I've been able to piece together, I don't think he's blameless. I think that's now his third where he's got to apportion some of the blame. He can't keep doing it. So he's my villain of the weekend. Your surprise good. I'll go first on the surprise good to see if you can remember your surprise good. I've gone for One Motorsport. What a difference the summer makes. They've come back. They've looked really fast. We've got to see this progress continue. They've got to be quick and not kill. They've got to be quick for the rest of the season. But if this is a sign of things to come, the second half of the season should be quite profitable for them. Cook's going to win the independents anyway. Yeah. See if they can take a win outright. That would be really good for them and get the car set up ready to challenge properly next year. But it's looking good for One Motorsport, and I didn't see such a quick turnaround coming.
No, nor did I. And I completely agree with you on that. Did I go for Cook?
No.
Oh, I didn't go for Cook. Okay, who did I go for?
I went for Doble.
For Doble. Oh, yeah. Astra. Didn't think it was going to do very well this weekend. All the PMR boys have finished fairly strongly, gone about their business in a fairly quiet manner, despite that little incident that Aaron Taylor-Smith had. But Doble to quietly be creeping along, taking the lead in the Jack Sears, as a driver that we knew practically nothing about coming into the season. Very excited to see how the season's going to end for him.
Agreed. I think he's a real contender for the Jack Sears because he finishes races and he finishes races well in the Jack Sears. He's normally in the top 3. Yeah, he does. He's doing really well in his debut season. And interesting to see if he can get it over the line. Surprise bad, I've gone for Rory Butcher. Not just because I keep saying that I think it's a dark horse, but I thought Toyota were going to go well here this weekend. I thought it'd be a track that would suit them. And ultimately, yes, you can say there's a few extra factors, mitigating factors. Shoulda, woulda, coulda in terms of qualifying, but for Butcher, it's not the first time a weekend like this has happened for him, and it's just been a disappointment. And this is probably the most disappointing cherry on the disappointing cake. That is actually not a cake; it's actually sardines, which makes it so disappointing.
Is it bad that I think I can actually remember my surprise bad?
No, go for it.
Out of all of them,
Go for it, and I'll tell you if you're right.
for me, it has to be Morgan.
Hooray!
Hey. Yeah, it's a really bad weekend for Morgan. Outformed by Jelly. Jelly was until the last race consistently up with Hill and Turkington this weekend, although a little bit off their pace. But Morgan struggled to get inside the top 10. Didn't qualify very well, and whether it was his fault or not, had mechanical issue in race 3, which means that he didn't finish and didn't pick up many points at all this weekend, which is a surprise for what should be a good BMW track.
Agreed. Right, Sam, any final thoughts about Croft?
About Croft, I wish we had more wet weather because some of the support races in those greasy conditions were exciting, especially the Legends races. Certainly go and try and find those on a British touring car highlights package or YouTube or wherever they show their content, because it's well worth a watch. And there were some interesting cars in some interesting places when they were racing. It's the Fords, isn't it? The Fords are good everywhere, and it is going to take something special to stop them doing it for the rest of the season, in my mind.
I don't disagree with anything you've said. I'm going to go even more left field for my final thought. I hate the 3 tyre allocation. I don't think it spices things
Really?
up. I don't think it spices things up at all. I think it actually has a negative effect because drivers are almost writing off an entire race to say, right, we can't do anything on this race. Write this one off. 2 tyres, yeah, I can get behind that. 2 tyres, fine. Let's have one. We have to run the slightly worse tyre in the medium, but all 3, you've basically got teams just writing off races and going, do you know what? We'll just write this. We're starting mid pack, write it off, and we'll see what happens the rest of the day. But is that good racing? Is that good for racing? I don't think it is. And actually, has it changed anything? The drivers that have won the races are the drivers you expect to. There's no real difference on the podium. There's no real difference in results based on the tyres. You look at it and say it provided a good bit of racing with Moffat in race 1. Yeah, okay, cool,
Yeah.
fine. And obviously Butcher, Boutel, and DeLyon were able to come through in race 3 on the soft. Yeah, fine. But was it good? Did it really change much? Has it changed the championship? Is it making the front fight more interesting? I think the answer is no. And I get part of that is what will make it exciting because Napa are so good and Ingram's really good and Turkington will always score points. But it's not, in my opinion, it's hindering the battle because they're all starting on different tyres and it ends up meaning that teams are having to basically sacrifice a race and going, we can't win this one, we'll try and get 6th and that'll be the best we can get. I don't like it.
Do you think it would be made more interesting if they didn't get to pick? They were just allocated a tyre randomly for each race. So you
No,
could get the front of the grid being on a hard, medium, soft, and one driver dropping back, the other making the most of it, and you get more disparity possibility or more possibilities in disparity between performances across the weekend. And you couldn't necessarily plan it until you actually get to the final race because you know what tyre you've got to run.
no, I've got an even more radical idea. Every weekend is soft and medium. However, a handful of cars will be soft and hard. They have to run the hard based on championship position. So no ballast, no hybrid. They have to run the hard tyre instead.
Okay. What, for just one race?
Yeah, for one race. Yeah. So rather than running the medium in a race, they have to run a hard in a race.
Surely they would just run that if they are in that championship battle. They would have to run that in, or they would just run that in the final race, where they're probably going to start lower down the grid anyway.
But they still need to get points in the bag. They can't risk an on finish. They put out 12 out the hat and then just put on a hard tyre and they don't score points. I don't know. I'm stretching a little bit. I agree, and I need to think about it a bit more. But to me, the tyre doesn't. It's not changed anything this weekend, and it's actually, in my opinion, it's led to teams being quite negative with tactics rather than positive with tactics. I don't like to see that in racing. I want to see positivity. Ironic, really, coming from me, but I want to see positivity and I want to see actual racing where cars believe they can race rather than go, right, we'll just write this one off and say it's not for us.
Okay, that's fair enough. Well, if you have enjoyed the podcast today, obviously leave us a like, give us a share as well as subscribing. If you do enjoy the content, we will obviously be back once again with the predictions and driver grades pod, which will come in the weekend, and then we will be off to Knock Hill. So we've got some special videos coming up. Hopefully, we're going to do a little vlog going up there and tell you about our experiences and let you come along for the ride. So if that's something you'd like to see, please do subscribe and get the notification bell on.
I think you've covered everything. All that's left to say now is bye.
Bye.